My name is Nusra Latif Qureshi. I'm basically from Pakistan and I moved to Australia about 22 years ago. My work basically looks at history in a different way, questioning it, challenging it, finding hidden parts of history or historical accounts or histories that are not very popular. So I look into archives, I go into museums and look for objects and manuscripts and accounts that are not part of mainstream art practice or histories. And I try to find areas which speak to me as a person coming from an ex-colony. So I grew up in Pakistan, and Pakistan was one of the British colonies, part of Greater India. And I'm really fascinated by the history and the untold and not popular parts of that history and the experience of being colonized and how it still lingers on in our everyday lives. There are certain traditions which are modified, there are certain practices and ways of thinking that are modified as a result of that big, huge experiment of colonization. And I try to find visual accounts and try to find traces of where those ways of seeing were altered and changed for the locals, for the people who were working in arts particularly, how they were made to look at their own practice and doubt it, how they were made to alter their way of representation in painting, how they were made to stop doing painting and work in photography studios in order to sustain themselves. I've got 5 works in the Biennial. One of them is called The House of Irredeemable Objects, and when you walk in the gallery, you see it from long distance away. You see a row of velvet curtains which is parted, and then you see a cabinet, like an old museum cabinet. And from a distance you can see that it's empty, but there are still spotlights in there. When you go closer, you find that there are impressions of some old Indian weapons in there, but there are no weapons in there anymore, just the impressions on a stretched velvet piece that have now been taken away from historical India. So all that experience is about a kind of deprivation, about a kind of loss, and how weapons in particular represent a certain kind of act of conquering, an act of aggression, that the conqueror takes away the weapons from the conquered, and then it's a way of telling them that we are better than you, we are stronger than you, we now have your weapons. And in the same room there is a very small cabinet where I have displayed very, very cheap toys shaped like swords. And there's a tiny little figure sitting in the middle, and then there are 2 toy soldiers. One is holding a sword and the other one is holding a bazooka or a rifle. It's like a clash of 2 civilizations, and you can tell very easily who is going to win. The sword cannot win from that distance. It's the gun or the rifle that will win.